Chairman Jim Walsh here on a Friday afternoon for our regular Chairman's Update. This is the end of the first week of the legislative session for the state government in Olympia, and it's been quite an interesting week. There's also been some interesting things going on at the federal level with a couple members of our federal congressional delegation. There's a lot going on. And I think there's the sense, at least in Olympia, of change in the air. Things are not like they've been in the last few years, maybe the last decade at the state capitol. I want to talk about that for a minute, and then about some of the bigger issues at the federal and other levels. So after the first week of the legislative session, we see that the majority party in Olympia, the Democrat majorities in the state house and the state senate, and of course the governor's office and the state attorney general's office, very nervous and defensive all week. The governor has been nervous and defensive because his tax proposals, and there are several, are beginning to sort of eat at each other, turn against each other. The various supporters of the different tax hike plans on his side of the aisle can't agree with each other. Now, the governor, I had a chance to speak with him directly, person to person, on opening day of the legislative session, and I put it straight to him. Which of the several tax increases does he personally support? Would he put his own political capital behind? And there are four main state tax increase proposals that the Democrats are putting forward. The Republicans don't agree with any of them. They are a new state income tax, a so-called wealth tax, which is the expansion of the newly passed state capital gains tax, a so-called head tax, an experiment that the city of Seattle tried, a sort of turbocharged increase in the payroll tax that becomes almost effectively another form of income tax. And then the old one they've been trying to push through the last few years, an increase in property taxes in the state by allowing local jurisdictions to automatically increase their part of property taxes at the rate of 3% a year with no vote of the people. Currently, they can increase property taxes 1% a year with no vote of the people. So that would be a 300% increase in how much they can increase, the rate of increase on property taxes. All four of these ideas, state income tax, wealth tax, really capital gains expansion, payroll tax, called head tax, and property tax increase, all four are bad ideas. But I put it straight to the governor, looking him in the eyes. Mr. Ferguson, which of those four will you put your political career on the line to support? And he answered very quickly, something the governor doesn't always do. He tends to be a, on the one hand, on the other hand guy. But he said very quickly, the state income tax. That is the project that he personally is going to stake his career on. Our state, of course, traditionally has not had a state income tax. Our state constitution in Article 7, Section 1, doesn't prohibit a state income tax, but says if you're going to have one, it has to be flat on everyone. You can't have a graduated one where some people pay more than others. You can't have one where some people pay it and others don't. It has to be flat. Everybody has to pay the same income tax. The governor's proposal, of course, he calls it a millionaire's tax. It's an income tax only on some Washingtonians, unconstitutional under Article 7. Also illegal under statutory laws. You'll remember a couple years ago, the legislature passed Initiative 2111, the initiative that I wrote, that bans a state income tax, any form of state tax based on personal income in the state of Washington. So the governor's going to have to overturn the statutory law, which he can do with the support of a majority of his legislators, And then he's going to have to deal with the constitutional problems, which would be resolved likely at the state Supreme Court level. He is confident he can do both. I'm not certain he can do either. He says he has enough votes in the legislature to support the state income tax. Maybe he does. His party does have a majority of the legislator votes, but I'm not sure they'll all go for it. In part because some of his supporters in the legislature would prefer the so-called wealth tax. The wealth tax, of course, is an expansion of the capital gains tax to a tax on assets you own that you haven't sold. A capital gains tax takes effect only when someone sells an investment asset at a profit. It's a tax on that profit. This expansion puts the tax onto investments you own, real estate, stocks and bonds, gold bars, whatever you might own. It's an investment. Shoot, I guess these days, vintage comic books, whatever, would be taxed every year based on its estimated increase in value. Very difficult, but it's an expansion of an existing tax, so the money, in theory, would come in faster. Ferguson's state income tax would take a year or two to ramp up and take effect. So some of the greedy ones want the wealth tax, the capital gains tax, because it'll come faster. They're all bad ideas. And looming over all of their tax proposals is the specter, the ghost, the dark eminence of the fraud going on in child care centers here in Washington State. The story, of course, originally broke in Minnesota. It's spread now to some other states. We are one of them. Washington is one of them. There are credible allegations with credible evidence that our state bureaucratic agencies, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, the main one, but some others too, the State Department of Social and Health Services, DSHS, maybe the State Department of Commerce, maybe the State Department of Revenue. These state bureaucratic agencies each had a role to play, it appears, in a sort of systemic scheme of paying grants and direct payments to supposed child care centers watching children around the state that either didn't really exist at all or had been closed for a long time. These ghost child care centers had done the paperwork correctly. They had their licenses and everything. That's where DCYF, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, comes in. But they weren't actually, in some of the cases, they weren't actually watching kids. They weren't functioning. But they applied to the state of Washington for direct payments, grant money that was supposed to help them operate and provide child care to working class families. I mean, it's a good goal. But it was a con. It was a grift. They didn't exist. They were collecting money from the state government, but they weren't actually running a child care center. And the real key to this whole controversy and scandal, and some of the facts are still emerging, is the money that the state agencies sent to these allegedly ghost child care centers wasn't just state taxpayer money. Some of it was federal taxpayer money. So some of the money you pay back to DC and some of the money you pay to Olympia was being channeled into this allegedly fraudulent child care scam. Now, the local big shots are nervous because since some of the money was federal dollars, the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI and other federal agencies are beginning to look into the matter. What we've seen, and earlier this week, I, working with Jonathan Cho and a couple of other journalists who've been investigating these stories, we put together a court filing, a lawsuit, requesting that the state court in Thurston County issue an injunction against some of these state agencies, DCYF, DSHS, State Department of Revenue, because documents they had published openly, publicly, on their internet websites that were related to some of these child care centers have been disappearing from the internet. We don't know for sure what happened. It may be they're scrubbing them. The people at the agencies are taking down these documents related to the potentially fraudulent child care centers. Our injunction request asks the court to order them to not delete any documents that they have published publicly where people can see them on the internet. Those are critical tools, those documents, to investigative journalists and perhaps government investigators to identify the size and scope of the fraud. There was also an interview this week with the state auditor who admitted that the Department of Children, Youth, and Families has not provided the state auditor's office with the relevant data related to these child care payments in 4 years. This is waste, at least, and fraud, systemic fraud at most. It is essential that we look into it and investigate it and determine the size and the scope of the fraud. It's your tax dollars that are being misused. And the reaction of the governor and the Speaker of the House and the leader of the state Senate, all progressive Democrats, nervous, a little bit angry, snippy, saying it's wrong to investigate allegations of fraud when there's credible evidence. I don't agree with that. Elected officials have a duty to watch how taxpayer dollars are spent. I think what we have in the state of Washington is a situation where one party has been in charge in Olympia for so long they've forgotten their essential duties. Now, it's not all just about Olympia. This week we've seen a few of our federal congressional delegations, Congress members, acting bizarrely. The Congresswoman from the 6th Congressional District, Emily Randall, has posted pictures of herself on the internet that are just incredibly embarrassing to herself and to the state. She spoke up in a congressional hearing where she said we should not look in to these allegations of fraud at child care centers. We need to investigate white men. It was simply bizarre. And she was widely ridiculed and compensated for these ridiculous comments by flying to Minnesota, where she's going to protest ICE. This is a congresswoman. This is a sitting congresswoman. What does protesting ICE in another state have to do with credible allegations of fraud in the state she represents? Different state. Strange stuff. Her colleague from the 3rd Congressional District, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, posted on social media and got into the mainstream media a bizarre rant full of expletives, obscene language, nominally about a con going on, a grift, where small businesses are defrauded by con men and women who are getting fees to file certain business license documents that a small business can file for no cost with state agencies or federal agencies. It's a bad thing, to be sure, but the strange part, the really weird part of Gluesenkamp-Perez's post on the internet is she's trying to sound like some sort of sailor or truck driver using bad language. Doesn't really suit her. She's a sort of urban hipster type personality and clearly trying to play act to seem like a blue-collar tough neck. These responses, whether it's the governor acting skitterish and nervous, whether it's the Speaker of the House, Representative Jenkins, acting nervous, whether it's the state Senate leader, Jamie Peterson, acting anxious and nervous, they're afraid because they're not used to being held to account for their actions. And we're seeing it with these left-wing Congress members. We're seeing it with the left-wingers in Olympia. This is the reason that it seems that change is in the air in Washington. At least I hope it is. We've been working for a while, the last few years, to put change in the air. I think some of our effort is starting to bear fruit. There's going to be a lot more to talk about. I've gone on for quite a long time here. But the first week of the legislative session, the season, is finished in Olympia. And there's going to be a lot more interesting activity in the weeks ahead. I will keep you posted in these videos. Keep in mind, we have refiled the voter ID initiative. We didn't get enough signatures on the first pass. It will take about 2 more weeks for the newly refiled version to go through the processes and get a number assigned to it and the rest. As soon as that's done, we will get petitions for signatures out for this new petition. We're going to have to start over from zero. We've got to collect 310,000 signatures by approximately the 1st of July. We have about 5 or 6 months to get there. And there's a lot more going on. I'll keep you posted. But for now, until next time, be well and stay strong.